Today I'm going to be talking about Robert Frost. He was born in California, yet his writing style and his upbringing all were based around New England. His family moved to New England when his father died, and his father left the family with only $8 to live. His mother had to support his entire family off of working a bunch of jobs around the New England area. Robert Frost didn't graduate from college, yet he received over 40 honorary degrees from very prestigious colleges such as Harvard, Princeton, Oxford, Cambridge, and he's the only person to ever receive 2 honorary degrees from Dartmouth. His life was very hard, and his writing reflects this. One of his sons committed suicide, and his daughter had a complete mental breakdown. However, his life wasn't always bad. He started to work on writing while he was in England. Then he came back to the United States and prospered off selling his works, as well as teaching and lecturing at various universities. His poems all have a general connection to New England. Although he's not from there, he uses it as a main theme in all of his poems. He uses the terrain and regionalism as a main theme.
Stopping by woods on a snowy evening has a major theme of isolation. The poem uses the word woods instead of forest. Woods creates a sense of a wild expanse that's cold and quiet. The second line says his house is in the village though, which creates 2 distinct places, the woods and the village. This makes it very clear that people don't live in the woods and live in the village. The speaker also says he will not see me stop here. This makes it seem like our speaker is being watched and doesn't want to be seen. He also is a bit paranoid as he personifies his horse when he thinks his horse finds it weird to not stop at a farmhouse.
So the first stanza of Frost's poem uses the AABA rhyme scheme. You can see that he sets up the next stanza scheme with the word here. He does this for every stanza except the last, but we'll get to that a little later. Frost's tone is really soft and soothing, and the commas and semicolons provide pauses and breaks in the poem to really add to the slow, relaxing voice. The first stanza, along with the rest of the poem, is iambic with 4 stressed syllables, with almost identically structured stanzas. When Frost uses woods instead of maybe like forest or thicket, he's trying to emphasize a relaxed feeling, yet also something that is simple. It's also snowing, so you wouldn't describe a snowy forest.
The speaker isn't exactly alone as he has his horse with him. The horse finds it odd that the speaker has stopped and even rings his bell as to question why they have stopped. They also stop on the darkest day of the year, adding to the many details of these woods that make them lonely.
In the second stanza, Frost utilizes a BBCB rhyme scheme, using words that rhyme with here from the first stanza and setting up the next stanza with lake. When Frost describes the night being dark and more of being solitary, the poem gradually gets darker physically and abstractly. One can make connections with death as the speaker and his horse venture off alone through the darkness of the night. And one small tiny detail is a period at the end of the stanza, signifying an end, the darkest day of the year. The second stanza also has some intensive nature imagery, as Frost describes the company of his horse and the pair stopping in the woods alone, simply enjoying the surroundings. You can try to imagine the trees of the woods covered with snow around them, and the beautiful frozen lake at night. Frost uses a CC-DC rhyme scheme, following the previous 2 stanzas almost identically. He has some alliteration when he says, sounds the sweep, and he gives his harness, but this is a very minuscule and most likely unimportant. There's a lot of sounds in this stanza as Frost describes the snow falling, the bell shaking, and the wind blowing in the night. It's almost as if something is coming or the speaker is waiting for something to happen. You can feel the growing of suspense in this part of Frost's poem. There is some nature imagery as well when he describes the peaceful surroundings and the whispers of the cold evening. From these 3 stanzas, word choice and word length is very important because the stanzas have to stay almost identical in length and syllables. The words have to flow too. For instance, in the last line of the 3rd stanza, Frost might use easy instead of gentle because it flows better with the sentence before when it uses only.
In the second stanza, the poem says the only other sounds, the sweep of the easy wind and downy flake. The forest is so quiet that the only thing our speaker can hear is the wind and the snow falling. A speaker likes this silence, which is why he stops in the woods. In the last stanza, it says, "The woods are lovely, dark, and deep, but I have promises to keep." This line shows that our speaker loves the woods and finds it relaxing to stop by. But he can't stay there forever, as he probably has a family to return to, or a job that he has to return to.
In the fourth stanza, Frost uses a D-D-D-D rhyme scheme. He repeats the same words, different from the rest of the poem, because it implements a drifting, soothing sound to the last lines. In terms of the whole poem, Frost uses short, simple words to describe the aspects of life, the pattern of small parts of someone's life, all adding up to a bigger picture. The speaker is tempted to stay longer in the woods, but he remembers his promises he has to keep, or his obligations. The woods are restful and seductive almost, and quiet. It serves as a place far from reality where the speaker can rest and enjoy sleep. The last two lines are like a soft, penetrating gong and are similar to a dying whisper. The sleep is death. The speaker is far from death, and the repetitions show going back to the real world. The thought of death is tempting to the speaker, but he remembers his obligations and responsibilities, which force him to go back to reality. So like Dickinson, Frost used short, simple poetry that went on a deeper level in describing nature and what it means. Dickinson was an observer and liked to write about the beauty of nature and her surroundings. Frost also disregards the rules of grammar and punctuation in the poem, similar to the way Dickinson wrote. She capitalized differently and punctuated her poems with dashes. Both used punctuation to their own needs, and both also wrote in first person, not necessarily their own voice, but in the voice of the speaker of the poem.